I understand your request. I'll create a realistic American horror story in American English titled, She Was Both His Grandma and His Lover, The Secret That Destroyed 3 Generations. The story will be divided into 10 parts of approximately 700 to 800 words each, totaling between 7,000 to 8,000 words. I'll write the complete story without using artifacts or asking to continue. The small town of Millfield, Pennsylvania had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. At least that's what they thought. For the Harmon family residing in their Victorian home on Maple Street for over 60 years, secrets ran deeper than the town's oldest well. James Harmon, 27, stood on the weathered porch of his family home, keys dangling from his trembling fingers. It had been 7 years since he'd last set foot in Millfield. 7 years since the funeral. 7 years of running from the truth that now threatened to consume him entirely. The late September wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of approaching rain. "You could still walk away," whispered Claire, his fiancée, her hand warm against the small of his back. "We can sell the place without you ever going back inside." But James knew better. The lawyer's letter had been specific. The inheritance came with conditions. To receive his grandmother Eleanor's estate. Valued at over $2 million, he needed to live in the house for 1 month and sort through her belongings personally. No hired help, no shortcuts. "I need to do this," James said, inserting the key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing the darkened foyer. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and something else, something that made his skin crawl. Claire squeezed his hand as they stepped inside. The house appeared frozen in time. Eleanor's reading glasses still rested on the side table. Her knitting basket sat by her favorite chair as if waiting for her return. Nothing had been touched since her death, per her explicit instructions. "It's colder in here than outside," Claire noted, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. James nodded absently, his eyes drawn to the large portrait hanging above the fireplace, a painting of Eleanor in her youth. She had been beautiful once, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to follow him across the room. The same eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. "I'll get the bags from the car," Claire said, leaving James alone with the ghost of his past. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight as he approached the portrait. His grandmother's eyes seemed to hold a challenge in them, as if daring him to discover what lay hidden behind the walls of the old house. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Dr. Matthews, his therapist. "Remember what we discussed, James. Confront the past, don't let it consume you." Easy for her to say, she didn't know the half of it. A sudden crash from upstairs made James flinch. Claire appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed. "What was that?" "Probably just the house settling," James said, though he didn't believe it himself. As they climbed the stairs, James couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Every shadow seemed to move in his peripheral vision. Every creak of the old house sent a shiver down his spine. The master bedroom door stood slightly ajar at the end of the hall. James pushed it open, revealing Eleanor's immaculately preserved room. Her 4-poster bed was still made, the floral bedspread untouched. Her vanity table was lined with antique perfume bottles and a silver-handled hairbrush that still contained strands of her gray hair. "This is unsettling," Claire whispered, running her finger through the dust on the dresser. James opened the heavy curtains, allowing the fading daylight to illuminate the room. That's when he noticed the keys, small and ornate, hanging on a thin chain around the neck of a porcelain doll sitting in a rocking chair in the corner. "I've never seen that doll before," he said, approaching it cautiously. The doll's painted eyes stared vacantly back at him. Its porcelain face was cracked along one cheek, the fracture extending down to its neck. James carefully lifted the key from around its neck. "What do you think it opens?" Claire asked. "I don't know," James replied, "but I intend to find out." As darkness fell outside, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The house seemed to breathe around them, expanding and contracting with each passing hour. And somewhere, buried deep within its walls, lay the truth he had spent 7 years trying to forget, the secret that had destroyed 3 generations of his family. And now he was back, about to uncover it all again. The next morning, James awoke to the sound of Claire showering in the adjoining bathroom. He had barely slept, haunted by dreams of Eleanor calling his name from the darkened corners of the house. The key from the doll lay on the bedside table, catching the early morning sunlight filtering through the curtains. Downstairs, James made coffee in the kitchen, trying to ignore the framed photographs on the wall pictures of Eleanor holding him as a baby, as a child, as a teenager. His parents were notably absent from most family photos. An accident when he was 5 had left him in Eleanor's care. At least that's what he'd always been told. The kitchen phone rang, startling him. It shouldn't be working. They hadn't set up service yet. After 4 rings, it stopped. James stared at the device, his heart racing. When it rang again moments later, he cautiously picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Static filled the line, punctuated by what sounded like faint breathing. "Hello?" he repeated, louder this time. James ... The voice was barely audible, distorted by static but unmistakably feminine. "You shouldn't have come back." The line went dead before he could respond. James slammed the receiver down, his hands shaking. "Everything okay?" Claire asked, entering the kitchen, hair still damp from her shower. "The phone rang," James said. "It shouldn't be working." Claire checked the wall connection. "It's not plugged in, James." Before he could process this, his cell phone chimed with a new email notification. It was from Malcolm Richards, Eleanor's lawyer. The subject line read simply, "Time to begin." The email contained a video file. James played it, and Eleanor's face filled the screen. His breath caught in his throat. The video had been recorded shortly before her death. "James," she began, her once strong voice now frail. "If you're watching this, you've returned to the house as instructed. Good. There are things you need to know, things I couldn't tell you while I was alive." She coughed, a deep, racking sound. "The key around the doll's neck opens my study. Inside, you'll find a red leather journal. Read it. Understand what happened, then decide what to do with the truth." The video ended abruptly. Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What's she talking about?" "I don't know," James replied, pocketing his phone. "But I think it's time we found out." Eleanor's study was located on the 3rd floor, a room that had always been locked during James's childhood. The small key fit perfectly in the lock. Inside, the study was impeccably organized. Bookshelves lined the walls. A large oak desk dominated the center of the room, and filing cabinets stood in neat rows along one wall. On the desk sat a red leather journal, exactly as Eleanor had described. James picked it up, feeling its weight in his hands. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. "Are you going to read it?" Claire asked, scanning the bookshelves with curious eyes. James nodded, opening the journal to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, unmistakably Eleanor's. "August 15th, 1962. Today I met Thomas Harmon. He's unlike any man I've ever known. Intelligent, charming, with a darkness behind his eyes that calls to something inside me. Mother would be scandalized if she knew the thoughts I have about him. He's 20 years my senior, but age means nothing when souls recognize each other as ours did today. I know it's improper to write such things, but this journal is my only confidant. I believe I'm falling in love with Thomas Harmon, and God help me, I don't want to be saved from this feeling." James flipped forward several pages, his heart racing. "December 24th, 1962, Thomas proposed today. We'll be married in the spring. No one understands our connection, but they don't need to. The age difference raises eyebrows, but I don't care. What Thomas and I share transcends conventional understanding. He says I'm his soulmate, that he's been waiting for me his entire life. Sometimes the intensity of his love frightens me, but isn't that what true passion should do? Make you a little afraid of its power?" As James continued reading, a chill crept up his spine. The early entries depicted a passionate, if unconventional, romance. But as the years progressed, Eleanor's tone changed dramatically. "July 3rd, 1968, the doctor confirmed it today. I'm pregnant. Thomas is ecstatic, but I'm terrified. There's something not right about this pregnancy. I feel it in my bones." The dreams have become more vivid, dreams of a child with Thomas's smile in my eyes, a child born of sin. I haven't told Thomas about my suspicions. How could I? If what I fear is true, it would destroy him. It would destroy us all. A noise from downstairs interrupted his reading. It sounded like the front door opening. "Did you hear that?" James asked, looking up from the journal. Claire nodded, her expression concerned. "Someone's here." James and Claire descended the stairs cautiously. In the foyer stood an elderly man, perhaps in his late 70s, leaning heavily on a cane. His eyes widened at the sight of James. "My God," the man whispered. "You're the spitting image of him." "Who are you?" James demanded. "How did you get in here?" "I'm Dr. Walter Jenkins. I was your grandmother's physician for over 40 years. He held up a key. "Eleanor gave me this years ago for emergencies. The neighbors told me someone was staying here. I had to see for myself if it was true, if you'd really come back." James felt Claire's hand tighten around his. He'd left the journal upstairs, but its revelations weighed heavily on his mind. "What did you mean just now?" "I'm the spitting image of who?" Dr. Jenkins sighed, his weathered face creasing with what looked like regret. "Your grandfather, Thomas Harmon. Though I suppose grandfather isn't exactly the right word, is it?" James's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "You've found the journal, haven't you?" Jenkins asked. "Eleanor always said you would someday. Said the truth couldn't stay buried forever." Claire looked between them, confusion evident on her face. "James, what's going on?" Before James could answer, a framed photograph crashed to the floor, the glass shattering across the hardwood. All three of them jumped. This house has never known peace, Jenkins said quietly. Not since what happened here. James led the doctor to the living room where they sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Outside, dark clouds gathered, promising a storm. How much do you know? Jenkins finally asked. Not enough, James replied. I've only just started reading the journal. Jenkins nodded solemnly. Then perhaps I should fill in some gaps. Eleanor was just 17 when she met Thomas Harmon. He was 37, wealthy, charismatic. They married quickly against her parents' wishes. The first few years seemed happy enough, but Thomas ... He had secrets. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jenkins continued. Eleanor got pregnant in 1968 with your father, Richard. But there were complications with the birth. Eleanor nearly died. The doctors told her she couldn't have more children. Thomas was ... disappointed. He'd wanted a large family. James listened intently, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed beginning to fall into place. Richard grew up in this house, raised by parents with a failing marriage. Thomas became cold, distant. Eleanor threw herself into raising Richard. Then when Richard was 22, he brought home a girlfriend, a young woman named Sarah. Thomas took an inappropriate interest in her immediately. Claire gasped softly, beginning to understand where this story was heading. Sarah became pregnant with you, Jenkins continued. But before you were born, Richard and Sarah died in that car accident. At least that's the official story. Official story? James repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Jenkins's eyes grew distant. The brake lines on their car had been cut. The police suspected foul play but could never prove anything. Eleanor raised you afterward, keeping you away from Thomas as much as possible. But Thomas ... he was obsessed with you. Said you were special, that you carried his legacy. Eleanor never trusted him around you. Why? James asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Because Sarah wasn't just Richard's girlfriend, Jenkins said quietly. She was Thomas's daughter from an affair years earlier. A daughter he'd never acknowledged publicly, but whose existence he'd discovered just before Richard brought her home. The revelation hit James like a physical blow. He stumbled to his feet, nausea washing over him. That would make Thomas both my grandfather and... Your father, yes, Jenkins confirmed grimly. And Eleanor both your grandmother and your stepmother. Claire covered her mouth in horror. That's monstrous. Thomas didn't know Sarah was his daughter when they first met, Jenkins explained. But Eleanor suspected. She found evidence among his papers, letters, birth certificates. By the time she confronted him, Sarah was already pregnant with you, James. Did my parents, Richard and Sarita, they know? James asked, his voice breaking. Eleanor believed that Thomas told Richard the truth during an argument the night before the accident, Jenkins said. She always believed that's what led to their deaths, though she could never prove it. Outside, the storm broke in earnest, rain lashing against the windows. The house seemed to grow darker, the shadows in the corners deepening. What happened to Thomas? Claire asked. He died when James was 10, Jenkins replied. Heart attack, supposedly. Eleanor never spoke of him again. James struggled to process everything he'd heard. His entire identity, his understanding of his family, was crumbling around him. There's more, Jenkins said, his voice dropping even lower. Things Eleanor confided in me as her doctor. Things she could never bring herself to write down, even in that journal. A particularly violent thunderclap shook the house, and the power flickered momentarily. I should check the breakers, Claire said, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. She left the room, leaving James alone with Jenkins. What things? James asked once she was gone. Jenkins leaned forward. Eleanor believed Thomas had plans for you, James. Plans that died with him. She protected you as best she could, but she always feared that something of him lived on in you. That's why she made you come back here to face the truth, to understand the darkness in your bloodline, to make sure you didn't continue the cycle. What cycle? James demanded. Before Jenkins could answer, a scream echoed from the basement. Claire. James sprinted toward the basement door, Jenkins following as quickly as his aged body would allow. The narrow stairs descended into darkness, illuminated only by the beam of Claire's phone flashlight dancing frantically across the walls. Claire, James called out, taking the steps two at a time. Over here. Her voice was shaky. James, you need to see this. He found her standing before a section of the wall that had been recently disturbed. A portion of the old brickwork had crumbled away, revealing a small alcove behind it. Inside lay a metal lockbox. I was checking the breaker panel when I noticed this, Claire explained, pointing to the damaged wall. It looks like water damage weakened the mortar. When I touched it, the bricks just fell away. James knelt to examine the lockbox. It was rusted but intact, secured with a padlock that had long since corroded. With a hard tug, the lock broke apart in his hands. Should you open that? Jenkins asked, having finally made his way down the stairs. Some things are better left buried, son. But James was beyond heeding warnings. His entire life had been built on lies. He needed truth, no matter how painful. Inside the box he found a collection of yellowed newspaper clippings, photographs, and a small leather-bound book that appeared to be a diary different from Eleanor's journal upstairs. The book was smaller, the leather binding black rather than red. James opened it to the first page. The handwriting was angular, masculine, nothing like Eleanor's flowing script. The first entry was dated March 12, 1980. The boy shows promise. Eleanor tries to keep him from me, but I see myself in his eyes. The legacy continues, just as it should. The bloodline remains pure. This is Thomas's diary, James said, his voice hollow. He flipped through more pages, each entry more disturbing than the last. Thomas wrote of a sacred bloodline dating back generations, of selective breeding to maintain what he called special traits. He spoke of James as the culmination of decades of planning. July 24, 1983, the boy turns 5 tomorrow. Soon his education must begin in earnest. Eleanor objects, of course. She's grown weak, sentimental. She doesn't understand the importance of our work, the necessity of it. She threatens to take him away, to tell authorities about Sarah if I don't leave the boy alone. As if the opinions of lesser minds could matter. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much. The boy stays. He is my greatest creation. James felt physically ill, the diary shaking in his hands. He was insane, he whispered. Thomas believed in eugenics, Jenkins explained quietly. Believed he could create superior humans through selective breeding. It's why he married Eleanor. Her family had wealth, intelligence. When he discovered Sarah was his daughter, he saw it as an opportunity rather than the abomination it was. Claire placed a comforting hand on James's shoulder, but he barely felt it. He was numb, drowning in the horror of his own origin. Among the newspaper clippings were articles about Thomas's scientific research. Before retiring to manage his family's fortune, he'd been a geneticist, studying inherited traits. His work had been controversial, eventually discredited by mainstream science. Did he arrange for his own daughter and son to meet? Claire asked, voicing the terrible question forming in James's mind. Jenkins nodded grimly. Eleanor believed so. Sarah was given up for adoption at birth. Thomas tracked her down years later, orchestrated a chance meeting with Richard at university, and my parents' deaths? The car accident? Jenkins hesitated. Eleanor had no proof, but she always suspected Thomas discovered that Richard had learned the truth, and planned to go to the police. Thunder crashed overhead as the storm intensified. The basement lights flickered again, longer this time, before stabilizing. There's something else in here, James said, reaching deeper into the lockbox. His fingers closed around what felt like a small plastic container. He pulled it out, a prescription bottle, the label faded but still legible. Digoxin, Jenkins read, his expression darkening. A heart medication, toxic in high doses. James stared at the bottle. You said Thomas died of a heart attack. That's what the coroner ruled, Jenkins replied carefully. Eleanor poised him, James whispered, the realization dawning on him with terrible clarity. To protect me. Jenkins didn't confirm or deny it, but his silence spoke volumes. We should go back upstairs, Claire suggested, eyeing the crumbling walls nervously. This storm is getting worse. As they climbed the stairs, James clutched Thomas's diary and the prescription bottle. The truth he'd sought was far worse than anything he could have imagined. His very existence was the product of a madman's twisted experiment. In the living room, Jenkins settled heavily into an armchair, looking exhausted by the revelations. What happens now? Claire asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Before anyone could answer, a loud crash came from upstairs, followed by the sound of breaking glass. What was that? Claire gasped. The study, James said, already moving toward the stairs. Upstairs, they found Eleanor's study in disarray. The window had been shattered, allowing rain to pour in, soaking papers on the desk. But what caught James's attention was Eleanor's red journalet lay open on the floor, pages fluttering in the wind from the broken window. I left it on the desk, he said, confused. Closed. The wind must have, Claire began, but stopped when she saw what James was staring at. On the open pages, certain words had been circled in red ink that was still wet, glistening in the dim light. Together, the circled words formed a message. The truth won't save you. Some bloodlines deserve to end. We should call the police, Claire insisted, backing away from the journal as if it might bite her. James knelt to examine the circled words more closely. The red ink had smeared slightly from the rain, but the message was unmistakable. Someone's been in here, he said. Someone who knows about all of this. Dr. Jenkins stood in the doorway, his face ashen. There aren't many people left who know the whole story, Eleanor made sure of that. Who else knows? James demanded. Besides me? Eleanor's sister, Margaret, but she's in a nursing home with advanced dementia. And perhaps Malcolm Richards, the lawyer. James pulled out his phone and dialed Richards's number. It went straight to voicemail. Outside, the storm raged on, wind howling through the broken window. "We need to board this up," Claire said practically, always the voice of reason. "And maybe we should leave town until we figure this out." James shook his head. "I can't leave, not yet. The conditions of the will are clear. 1 month in this house or I forfeit everything." "Is the money really worth all this?" Claire asked, gesturing to the journal with its ominous message. "It's not about the money," James replied. "It's about understanding who I am, what I am." They found materials in the garage to temporarily seal the window. As James hammered the last board into place, his phone rang a blocked number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? James Harmon?" The voice was unfamiliar, female. "Yes? Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you are." The woman's voice was cold, detached. "Your grandmother tried to protect the world from Thomas's obsession. She failed." "What are you talking about? Who are you?" "Thomas Harmon didn't just experiment on his own family. There were others. I'm one of them." The line went dead. James stared at his phone in disbelief. "What is it?" Claire asked, noting his expression. "I think there's more to this story than even Dr. Jenkins knows," James replied. Downstairs, they found Jenkins examining the photographs on the mantelpiece. He looked up as they entered. "There's something you should know, James. Something I've been reluctant to tell you." James steeled himself for more revelations. "What is it?" Thomas Harmon wasn't just conducting private experiments within his family. Before his academic disgrace, he ran a research program at Millfield Medical Center. Officially, it studied inherited genetic traits. Unofficially, he was continuing his eugenics work. James finished, the phone call now making horrifying sense. Jenkins nodded grimly. Eleanor discovered it after his death. Young women from the area participating in what they thought was routine medical research. Thomas was selecting certain participants for more intensive study. "What kind of study?" Claire asked, though her tone suggested she already feared the answer. "The kind that resulted in pregnancies," Jenkins said quietly. "Thomas was creating children, James. Children with carefully selected genetic traits. Your half-siblings, in a manner of speaking." The revelation struck James like a physical blow. "How many?" Eleanor identified 7 before she stopped looking. The truth was too painful. "And these children, they'd be my age now?" "Roughly, yes." Eleanor tried to track them to ensure they were safe, placed with good families. But some she couldn't find. The implications were staggering. Not only was James the product of Thomas's twisted experimentation, but there were others out there, others who might have grown up knowing the truth, resenting the Harmon name. "The woman who called me," James said. "She said she was one of Thomas's experiments." Jenkins's eyes widened. That, single quotes, S. concerning. Eleanor feared that some of these children might have inherited more than just Thomas's genes. "What do you mean?" Claire asked. "Thomas wasn't just brilliant, he was disturbed. Possibly sociopathic." Eleanor worried that some of these children might develop similar tendencies, especially if they discovered the circumstances of their creation. James thought of the wet ink in Eleanor's journal, the broken window, the sense of being watched that had plagued him since arriving. "We need to leave," Claire said firmly. "Now." James hesitated. "If I leave, I lose the inheritance. And maybe more importantly, I lose the chance to understand everything that happened here. Is understanding worth your life?" Claire demanded. Before James could answer, the house phone rang again, the phone that shouldn't be working. All 3 of them stared at it, no one moving to answer. After 4 rings, the answering machine clicked on. Eleanor's voice emerged from the speaker, her voice from years ago when she'd recorded the outgoing message. "You've reached the Harmon residence. Please leave a message after the tone. Beep. Hello, brother." The same female voice from the phone call, now broadcast for all to hear. "I'm coming home. We have so much to discuss about our special family." The machine clicked off, leaving them in horrified silence. "She knows I'm here," James whispered. "And she knows where to find me." The remainder of the evening passed in tense silence. Jenkins insisted on staying, claiming the storm made driving dangerous. Though James suspected the old doctor was concerned for their safety. They took turns keeping watch while the others tried to rest, though sleep eluded James entirely. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear autumn day that belied the darkness hanging over the house. Claire made coffee while James pored over Thomas's diary, searching for any mention of the other children. "There's a pattern here," he said, spreading pages of notes on the kitchen table. "Thomas refers to subjects by number, not name. Subject 17 appears repeatedly. He seems particularly interested in her development. Do you think that's the woman who called? Claire asked, setting a mug of coffee before him. It could be. There's an entry here from 1989. Subject 17 continues to exceed expectations. Cognitive testing places her in the 99th percentile. But more importantly, she shows the same detachment I've cultivated in myself. Emotions don't cloud her judgment. She sees the world as it is, not as lesser minds wish it to be. Jenkins, who had been dozing in an armchair, stirred at this. That sounds ominous. There's more, James continued. The girl's adoptive parents report behavioral concerns. They don't understand her gifts, see them as abnormalities. Typical small minds. I've arranged for special schooling anonymously funded. Her potential must be nurtured, not stifled. He was tracking her development, Jenkins noted, interfering in her life from a distance. And Eleanor knew nothing about this? Claire asked. According to these entries, Thomas kept his most sensitive research hidden. After his death, Eleanor found evidence of the program but may not have uncovered the full extent of his involvement with these children. The doorbell rang, startling all of them. James approached the front door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A woman in a postal uniform stood on the porch, holding a small package. "Delivery for James Harmon," she called out, having seen the peephole darken with his eye. James opened the door cautiously, chain still in place. "I'm James Harmon." The woman smiled pleasantly. "Special delivery. Requires a signature." He closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it to accept the delivery. The woman handed him an electronic signature pad and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Have a nice day," she said, turning to leave. "Wait," James called after her. "Who sent this?" "I just deliver them, sir," she replied with a shrug, already walking down the path to her truck. Back inside, James examined the package. No return address, just his name printed in neat block letters. He carefully unwrapped it to reveal a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern he recognized immediately, the same pattern that adorned the banister of the main staircase in the Harmon house. "What is it?" Claire asked, peering over his shoulder. James opened the box. Inside lay a single key, larger and older looking than the one from the doll, and a folded note. He opened the note to find a message written in the same angular handwriting as Thomas's diary. "Father kept the best secrets in the basement. Deeper than you've gone. The key opens the truth. I'll see you soon, brother." "Vine is 17, she's playing games with us," Claire said, her voice tight with anger and fear. "Or leading me to more answers," James countered. "This is exactly what Eleanor feared," Jenkins said, studying the note. "Subject 17, whoever she is, has clearly been watching the house, waiting for your return." James stared at the key. "There must be another room in the basement, something hidden. That's what this unlocks." "James, this is madness," Claire protested. "This woman breaks into the house, leaves threatening messages, and now you want to follow her instructions? I need to know the truth, Claire. All of it." "I'm calling the police," she insisted, pulling out her phone. "And tell them what?" James asked. "That the psychotic offspring of my grandfather's eugenics experiment is stalking me? That my grandmother might have murdered my grandfather to protect me from his twisted obsession?" "We sound insane, Claire." Claire's shoulders slumped in defeat. She knew he was right. "At least let me go with you," she said. The three of them descended to the basement once more. This time James examined the walls carefully, running his fingers along the rough stone surface, looking for any indication of a hidden door. Thomas was methodical, Jenkins commented. If he hid something, it would be well concealed but accessible to him. James nodded, concentrating on his search. Near the back wall, behind shelves filled with dusty preserves and old tools, he noticed a slight discoloration in the mortar between stones. "Help me move this," he said, beginning to clear the shelves. Once the shelves were moved aside, the discoloration formed a rough outline of what could be a door. James pressed against various stones until one moved slightly under his touch. Behind it was a small keyhole. "This is it," he whispered, inserting the key from the package. It turned with a heavy click, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway. "There's a room back there," James said, shining his phone's flashlight into the darkness. "James, please," Claire begged. "Let's just call the police. This doesn't feel right," but James was already stepping through the opening. The passageway led to a small room, clinically white and surprisingly modern compared to the rest of the house. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk with an old computer sat against another, and on the far wall hung photographs, dozens of them, each showing a child at various stages of development. "My God," Jenkins breathed, having followed James despite his age. "It's all true." James approached the photographs. Each was labeled with a number and date. Subject 14, age 7, Subject 22, age 12, and prominently displayed in the center, larger than the others, Subject 17. The girl in the photographs had dark hair and piercing eyes that reminded James uncomfortably of his own. As the photos progressed in age, the resemblance became more pronounced. "She looks like me," he whispered. Thomas's genes, Jenkins confirmed. She's your half-sister. James turned to the filing cabinets, pulling open the nearest drawer. Inside were meticulously organized files, each bearing a subject number. He kept records of all of them, James said, his voice hollow. Their development, their education, their lives. He found Subject 17's file thicker than the others. According to the documents inside, her name was Evelyn Mercer, born to a surrogate mother in 1984, adopted by David and Catherine Mercer of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The file contained school reports, psychological evaluations, even medical records, all obtained illegally, James was certain. The most recent document was dated just 3 months ago, long after Thomas's death, long after Eleanor's. Someone's been maintaining these files, James said, showing the document to Jenkins. That's not possible, Jenkins said, examining the paper. Unless, double quotes, unless Thomas had help, James finished. Someone who continued his work after his death. A noise from the passageway made them both turn. Claire stood there, her face pale. Someone's upstairs, she whispered. I heard the front door open. The three of them froze, listening intently. Footsteps moved across the floor above them, deliberately slow. Back door, James whispered. We can get out through the cellar doors. They moved quietly toward the rear of the basement where a set of angled doors led to the backyard. James tried the handle, but the doors wouldn't budge. They're locked, he hissed, pushing harder. No, they're barred from the outside, Jenkins realized, examining the frame. Someone sealed us in. The footsteps above stopped directly over the basement door. A moment later, the door at the top of the stairs opened. James? A woman's voice called down. I know you're down there. I saw the hidden door open. It's time we talked. Jenkins grabbed James's arm. Don't answer, he whispered. You should listen to Dr. Jenkins, the woman continued, her voice echoing in the stairwell. He's been keeping secrets from you, too. James looked at Jenkins questioningly. The old doctor's face had gone ashen. What's she talking about? James demanded. Before Jenkins could answer, the woman began descending the stairs. Her footsteps were unhurried, confident. James, Claire, and Jenkins backed deeper into the basement, away from both the stairs and the hidden room. She appeared at the bottom step, a woman in her early 40s with dark hair streaked with premature gray, wearing a tailored black pantsuit. Despite never having seen her before, James recognized her immediately from the photographs. Subject 17, Evelyn Mercer. Hello, brother, she said, her voice calm, almost pleasant. I've waited a long time for this meeting. What do you want? James asked, placing himself between Evelyn and Claire. The same thing you want, Evelyn replied. The truth. The whole truth, not the sanitized version Eleanor fed you, or the partial truths Dr. Jenkins has been doling out. She turned her gaze to Jenkins, who seemed to shrink under her scrutiny. Tell him, doctor, she said. Tell him who really continued Father's work after his death. Jenkins shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Evelyn laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Still lying after all these years, she turned back to James. He knew everything, James. About the program, the children, the experiments. He wasn't just Eleanor's physician, he was Thomas's research partner. That's not true, Jenkins protested weakly. The records in that room tell a different story, Evelyn countered. Your signature is on half the medical reports, doctor. Your handwriting on notes dated years after Thomas died. James looked at Jenkins, searching the old man's face for any sign of denial. He found none, just a resigned weariness. I didn't know the full extent at first, Jenkins finally said. Thomas told me it was a legitimate genetic study. By the time I realized what he was really doing, I was already complicit. You helped him? James asked, disbelief and betrayal washing over him. I tried to minimize the harm, Jenkins insisted. It's to protect the children as best I could. After Thomas died, I monitored them to ensure they were safe, healthy. You monitored us like lab rats, Evelyn corrected. Tagged and tracked from birth. What do you want? Claire demanded, speaking up for the first time since Evelyn's arrival. Evelyn studied her with mild interest. You must be Claire. The fiancé, tell me, has James told you about the headaches? The blackouts? The moments when he doesn't feel quite himself? Claire looked at James in confusion. What is she talking about? James's stomach twisted. He'd never told Claire about the episode's brief moments when his vision would blur, when rage would wash over him for no apparent reason, when he would find himself in a different room with no memory of how he got there. It's nothing, he said. Just stress. It's the Harmon legacy, Evelyn corrected. Father's special genetic markers expressing themselves. I experienced them too. We all do. Of Thomas's special children. What genetic markers? James demanded. The ones he bred us for. Enhanced intelligence, certainly. But also what he called emotional detachment. the ability to make decisions without the burden of conventional morality. She smiled coldly. What a modern psychiatrist might diagnose as sociopathic tendencies. Claire backed away, horror evident on her face. You're saying Thomas deliberately bred for sociopathy? He called it clarity, Evelyn replied. The ability to see beyond traditional ethical constraints. He believed it was the next step in human evolution. That's insane, James whispered. Perhaps, but effective. Look at us, James. Look at what we've accomplished. I'm the youngest partner in my law firm's history, and you a brilliant architect at 27 designing buildings that win international awards. We achieve because we're unburdened by the emotions that hold others back. I'm nothing like you, James insisted, though a voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts. How many times had colleagues commented on his ruthless efficiency, his ability to make difficult decisions without hesitation? You're exactly like me, Evelyn countered. It's why Eleanor kept you away from Thomas, why she poisoned him when she discovered he was grooming you to continue his work. She saw in you what I embrace in myself. What do you want from me? James asked again, his voice harder now. I want you to accept who you are, what you are, and then I want us to continue Father's work. His work was monstrous. His work was visionary, Evelyn corrected. Flawed in execution, perhaps, but the concept was sound. Imagine a generation of humans bred for superior intelligence, free from emotional constraints, able to solve problems that have plagued humanity for centuries. You're talking about eugenics, Claire interjected. It was wrong a century ago, and it's wrong now. Evelyn dismissed her with a wave. Your fiancée lacks vision, James, but then she's not like us. She can't understand what we could accomplish together. I'm calling the police, Claire said, pulling out her phone. No signal down here, Evelyn noted calmly. And even if there were, what would you tell them? That I invited myself into my family home to have a conversation with my brother. This isn't your home, James said, isn't it? I'm a Harmon by blood, just like you. More deserving of the name, perhaps, since I've embraced our heritage rather than running from it. You're delusional, Claire said. Evelyn's expression hardened slightly. I've been more than patient with your presence, Claire. But my business is with James and Dr. Jenkins. Perhaps you should wait upstairs while we finish our discussion. She's not going anywhere, James said firmly. Have it your way. Evelyn turned her attention back to Jenkins. The doctor and I have unfinished business anyway. After all, he's the one who's been maintaining Father's records, tracking all of us, reporting back to Eleanor. Quite the double agent, weren't you, Doctor? Jenkins seemed to age before their eyes. I was trying to protect everyone involved. Eleanor needed to know which children might pose a threat if they discovered the truth. A threat? Evelyn laughed. Is that what I am, Doctor? A threat? Or am I exactly what Thomas intended me to be? She reached into her jacket and withdrew a small revolver. Now shall we continue this family reunion more productively? I believe it's time to discuss inheritance. The sight of the gun changed everything. Claire gasped. Jenkins stepped back, stumbling against a shelf. James remained where he was, his mind racing to find a way out of this situation. You won't shoot us, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Won't I? Evelyn replied, her tone conversational. What makes you so sure? Because you need me, James reasoned. Whatever you're planning, you came here for my help, not to kill me. Evelyn smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. Clever boy. You're right. I don't want to kill you, James. You're far too valuable, Doctor. Jenkins, on the other hand, double quotes, she shifted her aim toward the elderly doctor. He's outlived his usefulness. He betrayed Father, helped Eleanor poison him, then spent years hiding the truth from us. What do you think, brother? Shall we dispense with this loose end? Put the gun down, James said, his voice steady. Nobody needs to get hurt here. Someone always gets hurt when truth comes to light, Evelyn countered. That's the nature of buried secrets. They don't rest quietly. Jenkins raised his trembling hands. Evelyn, please. I've only ever tried to help. You experimented on children, she cut him off. You tracked us like animals. You helped create us, then feared what you made. Don't pretend you're innocent. I'm not, Jenkins admitted. But killing me won't undo any of it. No, Evelyn agreed. But it might feel satisfying. James took a careful step forward. If you kill him, you'll never get what you really came for. This caught Evelyn's attention. And what did I come for, James? Thomas's research. His complete records. Jenkins knows where they are, doesn't he? The files in that room are just a fraction of the whole. Jenkins's eyes widened slightly, confirming James's guess. Perceptive, Evelyn said, studying James with new interest. Father would be proud. Yes, the complete research is what I've been searching for. 2 decades of pioneering genetic work, lost when Eleanor purged his records after his death. Not lost, Jenkins corrected quietly. Protected. Where are they? Evelyn demanded. Safe, Jenkins replied. Away from anyone who might misuse them. Evelyn's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance, Doctor. Where did you hide Thomas's research? Stop, Claire shouted. This is insane. You're talking about secret genetic experiments like they're some kind of treasure. They're evidence of crimes. Crimes? Evelyn laughed. By whose standards, small minds afraid of progress? Father saw beyond conventional morality, beyond arbitrary legal constraints. He was creating something beautiful. He was creating monsters, Claire shot back. Evelyn's expression darkened. You should be more careful about insulting someone holding a gun. Claire, the research is in a safe deposit box, Jenkins interjected, drawing Evelyn's attention back to him. At First National Bank downtown. Eleanor had me move it there after Thomas's death. And the key? Evelyn asked. Eleanor had it. Had, Evelyn repeated. Past tense. Where's it now, Doctor? Jenkins hesitated, looking at James. It passed to James upon her death. It's part of the inheritance. The real inheritance. Not just this house. James's mind raced. No one had mentioned a safe deposit box key. But then he remembered. The small key around the porcelain doll's neck. Not just a key to Eleanor's study, but a symbol. A clue, the doll, he said, understanding dawning. The key around the doll's neck is a replica. The real key is inside the doll. Evelyn smiled, genuinely this time. Now we're getting somewhere. See how productive we can be when we work together, brother. I'm not your brother, James said coldly, and I'm not helping you continue Thomas's work. But you will help me retrieve his research, Evelyn countered. Because deep down, you want to know everything he discovered. You want to understand what we are, what he made us to be. The architect in you admires the design, even as the human in you recoils from it. She wasn't entirely wrong, and that disturbed James more than he wanted to admit. Part of him, a dark, quiet part he tried to ignore, was fascinated by Thomas's work, by the possibility that he was something more than human, something designed rather than born. The bank won't be open until Monday, he said, buying time. Even if I wanted to help you. We can't get to the safe deposit box now. Then we have the weekend to become better acquainted, Evelyn replied. A family reunion of sorts. Dr. Jenkins will be our guest until then. I won't be a part of this, Claire declared, reaching for her phone again. I'm going upstairs and calling the police. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Evelyn said, the gun still trained on Jenkins, but her attention on Claire. Not until we've concluded our business. Claire, James said quietly. Please stay. Something in his tone made her pause. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression that frightened her. James, what are you thinking? I'm thinking we should listen to what Evelyn has to say, he replied, his voice oddly detached. I'm thinking I want to see what's in that safe deposit box. James, no, Jenkins pleaded. Thomas's research is dangerous. That's why Eleanor wanted it locked away. Eleanor lied to me my entire life, James said coldly. She kept the truth about my parents from me. She decided what I should know and when I should know it. I'm done letting others decide what truths I'm ready for. Evelyn watched this exchange with evident satisfaction. There he is. There's the brother I've been waiting to meet, the true Harmonaire. Claire backed away from James, horror in her eyes. This isn't you talking. This is whatever Thomas engineered into you. How would you know? James asked, an edge to his voice now. You've known me for what, 2 years? I've been a Harmon my entire life. Maybe this is who I really am. Listen to her, James, Jenkins urged. Thomas designed his children to exhibit specific traits, including increased aggression and decreased empathy under stress. What you're feeling now, that's not your true self. Or maybe it's the truest version of myself, James countered. The version without fear or hesitation. Evelyn lowered the gun slightly. He's right, Doctor. We are what Father made us to be. The sooner James accepts that, the happier he'll be. Claire reached out to James, her hand trembling. James, please. This isn't you. I know you. For a moment, something flickered in James's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or recognition. But it passed quickly, replaced by a cold determination that Claire had never seen before. On Monday, we'll go to the bank, he said to Evelyn. We'll retrieve Thomas's research. Then I'll decide what to do with it. Evelyn smiled triumphantly. A wise decision, brother. I knew you'd see reason eventually. James, don't do this, Jenkins begged. Thomas's research includes formulas, compounds he developed to enhance the traits he bred for. Drugs that suppress empathy, increase aggression. They're too dangerous to ever see the light of day. Drugs? James asked, his attention caught. Biochemical compounds designed to activate dormant genetic markers, Jenkins explained. Thomas theorized that certain traits could be amplified through chemical intervention. He tested some of them on himself in the later years. Before Eleanor poisoned him, Evelyn added bitterly, Is that what's happening to me now? James asked. Some kind of chemical trigger? Jenkins shook his head. No, this is purely psychological. Stress, the revelations about your heritage. Evelyn's manipulation, they're triggering latent personality traits Thomas engineered into your genetic makeup. But with the compounds he developed, these changes could become permanent. Which is exactly what we want, Evelyn interjected. To fulfill our genetic potential, to become what Father intended us to be. Monsters, Claire whispered. He wanted you to be monsters. Evelyn turned to her, anger flashing in her eyes. You understand nothing. You're just a distraction. An anchor holding James back from his true destiny. She raised the gun again, but this time she pointed it at Claire. Time seemed to slow. James saw Evelyn's finger begin to tighten on the trigger. Saw Claire's eyes widen in terror. Saw Jenkins lunging forward despite his age, too slow, too far away to make a difference. In that moment of crisis, James's mind cleared. The cold detachment that had been creeping over him shattered, replaced by a single, overwhelming imperative. Protect Claire. He threw himself forward, colliding with Evelyn just as the gun discharged. The bullet went wide, embedding itself in the ceiling. They crashed to the floor, the gun skittering away across the concrete. Claire, run! James shouted, struggling to pin Evelyn's arms. She was surprisingly strong, bucking beneath him with a fury that seemed inhuman. Her eyes, so similar to his own, blazed with hatred. You're making a mistake, she hissed. She's nothing. Unworthy of you. She's everything, James countered, holding Evelyn down. She's what keeps me human. Claire hesitated, unwilling to leave James behind. Go, he insisted. Get help. This time she obeyed, rushing up the basement stairs. Jenkins moved to follow her, but his age betrayed him. He stumbled, falling heavily against the wall. Evelyn took advantage of James's momentary distraction, driving her knee into his stomach. He doubled over in pain, and she scrambled free, lunging for the gun. James recovered quickly, tackling her again before her fingers could close around the weapon. They grappled on the floor, a grotesque parody of siblings at play. For every move James made, Evelyn seemed to anticipate his counter. They were evenly matched, as if designed that way. We don't have to be enemies, Evelyn gasped, blocking James's attempt to pin her again. We're the same, you and I, two branches of the same experiment. Imagine what we could accomplish together. We're nothing alike, James insisted, though a part of him recognized the lie in his words. The cold clarity he'd felt earlier, that had been real. Terrifying, but real. Evelyn laughed, the sound brittle. You can lie to yourself, but not to me. I see the truth in your eyes. Thomas's truth. With a sudden burst of strength, she broke free of his grasp and scrambled toward the hidden room. James pursued her, but she slammed the hidden door in his face. He heard the lock click just as he reached it. She's locked herself in, he told Jenkins, who had managed to get to his feet. The gun, Jenkins reminded him. Get the gun. James retrieved the weapon from where it had fallen, checking to ensure it was still loaded. 4 bullets remained in the cylinder. We need to get out of here, Jenkins said, moving slowly toward the stairs. Call the police. We can't leave her in there, James argued. Thomas's records, his research hits, too dangerous. A sound from the hidden room caught their attention. Glass breaking, papers rustling. She's destroying evidence, Jenkins realized. James pounded on the hidden door. Evelyn, open the door now. You had your chance, brother. Her voice came through the thick stone. You chose the weak path. Now I'll finish Father's work alone. A new sound emerged from behind the door, the crackling of flames. She's burning the records, Jenkins gasped. We have to stop her. James threw his shoulder against the door, but it held firm. The key was on the inside with Evelyn. Is there another way in? He demanded. Jenkins shook his head. Not that I know of. Thomas designed it to be secure. The smell of smoke began to seep from around the edges of the hidden door. James redoubled his efforts to break through, ramming the door repeatedly. It's steel reinforced, Jenkins warned. You'll never break it down that way. James stepped back, raising the gun. Stand clear. He fired at the lock, the sound deafening in the confined space of the basement. The lock mechanism shattered, but the door remained closed. One more, he muttered, taking aim again. The second shot destroyed what remained of the lock. James kicked the door, and this time it swung open, releasing a billowing cloud of smoke. The hidden room was ablaze, filing cabinets overturned, papers scattered and burning. Through the smoke, James could see Evelyn feeding documents into the largest fire in the center of the room. Stop, he shouted, the gun trained on her. She looked up, her face illuminated by the flames, and smiled. Too late, brother. Father's legacy dies here. Get out of there, James ordered. The whole house could catch fire. That's the idea, Evelyn replied, continuing to feed papers into the flames. A cleansing fire. Eleanor burned Father's work once before. Now I'm finishing the job. Why? James demanded, confused by her sudden change of purpose. I thought you wanted the research. I wanted to understand, Evelyn corrected. To know what he made us to be. And now I do. She held up a half-burned document. We're monsters, James. Just like she said. The smoke was thickening, making it difficult to breathe, difficult to see. James advanced into the room, the gun still raised. We need to go, he insisted. Now. Did you know, Evelyn continued as if she hadn't heard him, that Thomas programmed self-destruction into us? A failsafe, in case his creations turned against him? Suicidal tendencies activated by specific cognitive triggers. She laughed, a hollow sound that raised the hair on the back of James's neck. We're designed to destroy ourselves if we ever fully comprehend what we are. Elegant, isn't it? His final control mechanism. You're not making sense, James said, coughing as the smoke invaded his lungs. We need to get out of here. I'm making perfect sense, Evelyn countered. For the first time in my life. We're abominations, James. Not the next step in evolution, just broken things, made wrong from the start. She stood amidst the flames, seemingly unconcerned by the fire licking at her clothes. Come with me, James pleaded, lowering the gun. We'll get help. Whatever Thomas did to us, we can undo it, can we? Evelyn asked, her voice suddenly small, almost childlike. I've spent 20 years trying to undo it. 20 years fighting what he built into me. I'm tired, James. So tired of fighting my own nature. A section of the ceiling collapsed, sending burning debris cascading into the room. The heat was becoming unbearable. Please, James coughed, extending his hand to her. We have to go now. For a moment, Evelyn seemed to consider his offer, then her expression hardened. Save yourself, brother. I've made my choice. She turned back to the flames, feeding the last of the documents into the inferno. James hesitated, torn between trying to save her and saving himself. In that moment of indecision, a support beam crashed down between them, sending up a shower of sparks and effectively cutting off any path to Evelyn. James, Jenkins called from the basement beyond. We have to leave now. With a final look at Evelyn, his sister, his mirror, his potential future, James retreated from the burning room. The last image he had of her was outlined against the flames, her posture one of grim determination as she completed her self-appointed task. Jenkins was halfway up the stairs, moving painfully slowly. James helped him the rest of the way, both of them coughing and gasping for clean air. The main floor of the house was still clear of smoke, but it wouldn't remain that way for long. James could hear sirens in the distance. Claire must have reached help. We have to get out, he told Jenkins, guiding the old man toward the front door. The research, Jenkins gasped. We can't let it burn, it's too late, James replied. And maybe it's better this way. Some knowledge should stay buried. As they stumbled onto the front lawn, fire trucks screeched to a halt at the curb. Claire ran to them, throwing her arms around James. I thought I'd lost you, she sobbed against his chest. James held her tightly, watching as firefighters rushed into the house. She's still in there, he told the fire chief, in a hidden room in the basement, behind the shelves on the back wall. The chief nodded grimly. We'll do what we can, but all three of them knew it was already too late. The basement was fully engulfed, according to the firefighters' reports. No one could survive those conditions. As they watched the house burn, the house that had held so many dark secrets for so long, James felt a strange sense of peace settling over him. The truth had nearly destroyed him, had awakened things in him he'd rather have left dormant. But in the end, he'd chosen humanity over heritage. It's over, he whispered, holding Claire close. Finally, over. But even as he said the words, a doubt lingered. In the distance, he could see the porcelain doll sitting in the back of his car, the small key still around its neck. Not the key to Eleanor's study, as he'd thought, but the key to a safe deposit box containing Thomas's complete research. The last piece of his grandfather's legacy remained intact. And deep within James, in a place he tried not to acknowledge, a cold curiosity wondered what secrets that research might hold. 6 months later, James stood on the balcony of his apartment in Seattle, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Behind him, Claire moved around the kitchen, the domestic sounds of dinner preparation, a comforting counterpoint to his troubled thoughts. They had left Millfield the day after the fire, once the police had taken their statements. The official report ruled Evelyn's death an accident, though James knew better. She had chosen her end, perhaps the first truly free choice she'd made in a life predetermined by Thomas's genetic machinations. The house, what remained of it, had been sold, the land cleared for new construction. The $2 million from Eleanor's estate now sat in an investment account, untouched. James couldn't bring himself to use it, not yet. It felt tainted somehow. Blood money paid for generations of secrets and pain. Dr. Jenkins had survived the fire but suffered a stroke 2 weeks later. He now resided in a care facility outside Philadelphia, his mind sharp but his body failing. James visited him monthly, each visit filled with more revelations as Jenkins unburdened himself of decades of secrets. "Dinner's almost ready," Claire called from the kitchen. James smiled, turning away from the view. "Smells great." Their life together had found a new equilibrium. The nightmares that had plagued James after Millfield had gradually subsided. The episodes of cold detachment, what he now recognized as the Harmon legacy, still occurred occasionally, but he had learned to recognize the signs, to step back and breathe until the feeling passed. Claire had insisted he see a therapist, someone who specialized in trauma and genetic counseling. Doctor. Patel didn't know the full truth, how could she? But she understood enough to help James navigate his complicated heritage. "Any word from the lab?" Claire asked as they sat down to dinner. James shook his head. "Not yet. They said the results would take a few weeks." After much deliberation, James had decided to have his genome sequenced. He needed to know what Thomas had done to him, what genetic time bombs might be lurking in his DNA. The knowledge was the only way to fight it. "Whatever they find," Claire said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "We'll deal with it together." James nodded, grateful beyond words for her unwavering support. She had every reason to run after what happened in Millfield, but she had stayed, her love a constant anchor in his storm of uncertainty. After dinner, as Claire washed the dishes, James retreated to his home office. From the bottom drawer of his desk, he removed a small wooden box, the same box that had contained the key Evelyn had sent him. Now it held something else, the small key from the porcelain doll's neck. He hadn't told Claire about the safe deposit box. Jenkins had confirmed its existence during one of their visits, had confirmed that it contained Thomas's complete research notes, the formulas for the compounds he'd developed, everything Evelyn had been searching for. James still hadn't decided what to do with it. Destroy it, as Eleanor had wanted? Study it, to better understand the enemy within his own genes? Use it to help others like him, the other subjects who might not even know what they were? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. An unknown number. "Hello? Is this James Harmon?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes, who's this?" "My name's Dr. Rebecca Marshall. I'm a genetic researcher at UC Berkeley. I understand you've been asking questions about Dr. Thomas Harmon?" James's heart raced. "Yes, I have. He was my grandfather." A pause. "That's interesting. Mr. Harmon, I'd very much like to speak with you in person. I've been researching your grandfather's work for years. There are things you should know." "What kind of things?" James asked cautiously. "Things about his research that weren't in the files that burned," Dr. Marshall replied. "Things about the children he created, including you." James froze. "How do you know about that?" "Because I'm Subject 22, she said simply, "and I've found others." "We need to talk, James. There's more at stake than you realize." James stared at the key in the box. "When and where?" "Tomorrow, noon. The Callisto Coffee Shop on Pike Street." She paused. "Come alone, James. This is family business." The line went dead. James sat motionless, the key cold in his palm. Just when he thought he'd escaped the shadow of Thomas Harmon, it reached for him again. Claire appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. Who was that? For a moment, James considered lying, considered protecting her from this new threat. But secrets had nearly destroyed his family once before. He wouldn't let them do it again. "Someone who says she knew my grandfather," he replied honestly. "Another of his ... subjects. She wants to meet tomorrow." Claire's expression tightened with concern. "Are you going?" James closed the box, the key still inside. "Yes. I need to know if there are others out there like me. Like Evelyn. People who might be dangerous. Or people who need help," Claire suggested gently. James nodded, touched by her insight. "Or that. Either way, I need to know." "We need to know," Claire corrected, sitting beside him. "We're in this together, remember?" James smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Together," he agreed. That night, as Claire slept beside him, James lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The Harmon legacy lived on in him and Subject 22, in however many others Thomas had created in his misguided quest for human perfection. But perhaps there was an opportunity here. Perhaps he could transform that dark heritage into something positive, not by continuing Thomas's work as Evelyn had wanted, nor by burying it, as Eleanor had tried to do, but by understanding it, by using that understanding to help those affected by it, by ensuring the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The safe deposit box key would wait a little longer. Tomorrow he would meet Dr. Marshall, Subject 22, and begin the next chapter of the Harmon legacy. This time he would write it on his own terms. As James finally drifted towards sleep, one thought remained clear in his mind. Some secrets deserved to be revealed, not to destroy but to heal. 3 generations of his family had been shattered by Thomas Harmon's twisted vision. Perhaps the 4th could begin to make amends.